This chart illustrates a standard project timeline, moving predictably from Phase 1 to Phase 5. To the outside observer, a commercial qualitative research project is sold as a neat, sequential assembly line. The reality is entirely different. It requires a highly iterative, non-linear cognitive process, where gathering data and synthesizing strategy happen simultaneously. To understand how this actually works, we must map the practical phases of a domestic project, examine the heavy cognitive burden placed on the researcher, and analyze how this entire architecture changes when it scales internationally. Every project is defined by a central friction. Practitioners must satisfy rigid deadlines and budgets while wrangling the inherently messy, chaotic nature of human responses. Navigating this hidden architecture is the only way to effectively transform a raw human interaction into an actionable business strategy. This timeline shows the foundation of a standard domestic qualitative project. To make the work commercially viable and easy to manage, agencies rely on these 5 sequential phases, starting with problem definition and design. Here, the researcher works with the client to translate business questions into researchable objectives. This involves constant negotiation, repeatedly looping back to refine the scope until both sides agree on a specific methodology. Phase 2 is recruitment and preparation. Specialist recruiters use detailed questionnaires, known as screeners, to find specific participants from the general public. If a recruiter brings in an off-quota respondent, someone who doesn't perfectly match the desired demographic or behavioral profile, their presence introduces severe bias. It immediately muddies the data and invalidates the specific cultural worldview the project is trying to access. Next comes fieldwork. This is the most visible element of the process, typically involving focus groups or in-depth interviews. To the client, these sessions often represent the entirety of the research. In the room, the moderator relies on active listening and the continuous, real-time management of group dynamics to keep the conversation productive. Once the groups are finished, the process moves to analysis and interpretation. The researcher takes these physical recordings of raw interaction and begins translating them into abstract, thematic concepts. They analyze the literal words spoken, the nonverbal body language, and the process factors, the specific order and energy with which ideas emerge among the participants. Finally, in delivering results, the researcher presents a debrief, forging all those abstract themes into concrete strategic recommendations for the client. This 5-phase model acts as necessary commercial scaffolding. It makes the project easy to sell and schedule, but it completely obscures the actual cognitive work happening underneath. That linear timeline is an administrative illusion. In practice, researchers operate under a concept known as all-at-once-ness. Analysis does not wait for Phase 4. The mental process of generating and refining hypotheses begins immediately during the live fieldwork. As participants react, the moderator is continuously parsing their responses, probing new angles, and adjusting the structure of the topic guide on the fly. This requires the practitioner to occupy what the industry calls the dual role, managing 2 competing responsibilities simultaneously. First, they must act as the pure researcher. This means maintaining a detached, completely objective observation of the participant's reality. Second, they have to act as the committed partner. They must actively filter those objective observations through the specific commercial goals of their client.
Navigating this dual accountability in real time is the defining friction of qualitative market research. It is the specific mechanism that separates actionable business insight from pure academic observation. When a project scales across international borders, it immediately encounters a massive structural tension. Multinational clients require comparability. They need standardized data pulled from different countries so they can effectively manage their global brands. But the methodology relies entirely on local sensitivity. Researchers have to capture the distinct, highly localized cultural meaning driving consumer behavior. This tension line is disrupted by 4 major barriers. The first is semantics. Even when countries share a language, specific words carry drastically different meanings in varying contexts. For example, a discussion about the brand Durex will yield very different results depending on where you are. In Australia, it signifies a roll of sticky tape. In the UK, it means condoms. The second barrier is social habits. Cultural norms heavily dictate group dynamics. In Japan, Younger respondents will often defer entirely to the opinions of anyone older or of higher status in the room, requiring a completely different approach to moderation. The third barrier is legislation. Local privacy laws determine whether groups can be video recorded or how personal data is handled, limiting the methods available to the researcher. And the fourth barrier is infrastructure. Varying levels of market consumerization dictate whether a country even has specialized viewing facilities or experienced local recruiters. Scaling qualitative research is never a simple copy-paste exercise. The entire domestic system must be redesigned to survive these four global variables. This flowchart illustrates the two primary competing agency structures the industry uses to manage these global challenges. The first is the democratic approach. A central coordinating agency designs the overarching project, but relies heavily on local agencies in each country to conduct the fieldwork and perform the primary analysis. The primary advantage here is that it maximizes local cultural sensitivity by keeping native researchers in the room. The risk is that relying on multiple local agencies can create inconsistent comparability, resulting in varying levels of analytical rigor across different markets. The second structure is the colonial approach. A central, multilingual team designs the project, travels to conduct all the fieldwork themselves, and performs all the analysis centrally. This delivers absolute consistency across markets and provides the central team with incredibly tight control over the final synthesis. However, this central team risks superficiality. Because they lack local immersion, they can easily miss deep, localized cultural nuances entirely. Neither model is flawless. The choice rests entirely on whether a client's business objective prioritizes standardized control or localized depth. Qualitative market research is not a passive, linear data collection pipeline. It is an architecture of managed tensions. Every project demands a constant balancing act between linear project management and the holistic, all-at-once nature of human cognition. Whether operating domestically or scaling globally through democratic or colonial frameworks, these opposing forces have to be tightly harnessed. The ultimate value and the inherent difficulty of qualitative research rests entirely on the practitioner's ability to balance methodological objectivity with commercial strategy.